Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Italian Wine Week by Wine Pleasures, 2 days of informative seminars and live interviews with boutique producers from in and around Italy. To make this work for you, the wine importer, you, the distributor, you, the retailer, you, the wine tourism operator, you, the journalist, you, the blogger, questions are essential and we're most welcome. So on the right side of your screen, or left, if it's inversed, please post your questions there. Right now you can say hello to everybody from wherever you are in the world. I'm here in Barcelona. Fine sunny day as usual. So do say hello, do post your comments, questions on the side. So first session is to put you on the map, a bit about each region represented in the live interviews that are coming up later in the program. There's one coming up immediately after this one. And for that, we're delighted to have Richard Boden's expert on Italian wines. So I'm going to bring Richard in. There we go. Hi, Richard.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Hi. So, Richard, where are you in the world at the moment?
I'm in Gorizia. We're just coming out of 65 days of lockdown, and as you probably see, my hairdresser hasn't opened yet, so struggling with getting back to a new kind of normality. But that's okay. We're adjusting. The vines are looking, yeah.
So you're right.
The vines are looking great. Sorry, Hundley, go ahead.
Sorry. So you're right up in the Slovenian border then?
That's right. It's just literally a stone throw away. You can step over the border here. Well, you could do if it wasn't locked down, but there.
I see. Okay. Right. Okay. Well, I'm going to hand over to Richard's going to deliver the session as per program, Wines of Italy. As I say, please post your questions. We've got people from Belgium, Toronto, Italy, of course, Las Vegas, Penedès, Atlanta. So global audience we've got, for you, Richard.
Okay,
so
great.
Over to you.
Okay, look forward to that. Okay, so hi, welcome. Thanks again for your interest in this session. We're going to take a whistle-stop tour through Italy. I've only got 45 minutes, and Italy's a big country. So the plan I'm hoping to follow is to have a quick look at some basic statistics just to start off, just to get the big picture. And then there's a narrative. I'm going to move this camera because that's a bit big. Then the narrative is going to focus on some of the most important regions, and as Anthony said, the ones which are featured in the events which follow up. So we're starting in the northeast, and we're going to look at the Veneto and Friuli Venezia Giulia, going down to the center, where we'll be looking at Tuscany, especially Chianti, then Vino Nobile, and new and very interesting Terre di Pisa. We're looking at the white wines from Umbria in Oviedo, and then going down south, we're going to look a little bit at Lazio, which is very interesting and up and coming, and then Puglia, one of the other big hitters. So that's the plan. Okay, I'm going to start my slides. Okay, this is not coming out huge, but I think it's okay to be going with. So this is the big picture. I should say a little bit of premise about statistics, because anyway, as you know, there are lies, damn lies, and statistics, and that's particularly true of Italy. Anybody who's trying to research anything in Italy which involves numbers will know that it's quite difficult to source. They come from different sources, and the numbers in the sector of wine report different things in different ways from different sources. So take that with a pinch of salt. I'm pretty confident about the areas under vine. I'm quoting as we go along productions in hectoliters, which is kind of the standard way of doing it, but more, I think, to show the comparison between regions, so the kind of the scale of production, rather than give a very, very precise indication. Although we can look at where production is going up, where they're stable or declining, which we hope not. One of the interesting things about Italy is that it's the only country in Europe which is actually using up its EU quota of new plantings. As you know, there's a limit on the new plantings, and Italy is regularly claiming it's 1% per annum. So the area under vine is actually increasing. There's the big annual production. It's obviously into millions of hectoliters. Represents 19% of the world production, of wine production, so a fifth, basically. In terms of export, it's second in terms of volume to Spain and second in terms of volume to France. A surprising thing, I think probably an unexpected little bit of information for people coming to Italy and associating it mainly with red wines, which is perhaps where the prestige stuff is, that Italy is now balancing towards whites. 56% white, 44% red is current. Here's an interesting one. I know Anthony posted this in the poll. Depends how you count these, but at a conservative estimate...
Actually, sorry to interrupt, Richard.
Yes.
We can actually put the poll up now.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So the question is, how many native grape varieties are currently in commercial production in Italy?
Right.
And here we go. It's...
Okay, well, I'm skipping that one then. Thanks for warning me. Yeah.
People can vote now if they want.
Okay, great.
More than 1,000, between 500 and 1,000, less than 500, or nobody knows.
Yeah.
So let's give 20 seconds for that. Okay, we got 42%, less than 500, 28%, 500 to 1,000. Now 50% are going for less than 500.
Yeah, I think they might have seen my slide, Anthony.
I would have gone for nobody knows, but anyway.
I think that's nobody knows. It would have been a safe guess, I think, because it is very, very difficult to calculate. And actually, what actually qualifies for autochthonous native is a complicated thing to work out too. Ian D'Agata is perhaps the most important English language authority in the area. From the National Register quotes 377. He's pretty convinced from his own research that it's more like 500, but I've seen estimates that go way beyond that. And then you have to decide what's in production, what's not in production. But I think the message is that Italy is principally making wine from native varieties, which is one of the things which makes it really, really interesting, I think. Around about a quarter of all the world's native grape varieties grow in Italy, which is a really fascinating little bit of statistics. Anyway, so we're on the Veneto. Veneto, a big hitter, obviously. Big area, 87,000 hectares. That's big. It's a big region. Hectoliters, well over 12 million hectoliters, which is a lot. Quality wines, premium wines, the DOP, so DOCs and DOCGs make up 70% of the production. And that's been a regional policy, and I think it works very well for them. In that 14 DOCs and 28 DOCs, obviously there's some minor ones because this is Italy, but only 17% EGT. And that would be interesting to make the comparison with Puglia when we get into the last slide. Veneto makes 25% of the total national wine production and a third of the national white wine production. And you can guess where most of that comes from. Here's the next slide. Veneto has critical mass. In trading terms, in export terms, we have Prosecco, which is basically a brand. So I put together Prosecco and Conegliano Valdobbiadene, and we get onto the distinction in a minute, but that's the critical mass, which is pretty significant. Estimates for the wine going into bottle now or coming out of the tank in the bottle go between 485 million bottles to 500 million bottles. So they'll be coming out into the market soon. Production has quadrupled since the revised DOC in 2010. Well, the first production came out in 2010. So, yeah, and in the last 10, 12 years, a quadruplication of the production. So it's a big hitter. Then we have the staunch classics, the things which perhaps people identify the most with Venetos, the Amarone, and the Soave. Trending, as trending, I've gone for profile, obviously. So in the guides, what's being talked about in the specialist press, but also in production, because the three I've nominated here, so Asolo, which is a Prosecco, Lugana and Bardolino, three denominations which over the last 10 years have had a steady year-on-year increase in production, which means obviously they've got something working for them. Niches, I picked out a couple of sweet wines because people tend to forget those. They're not the most fashionable styles, but the Veneto makes some really nice ones. Torquolato one and Ritorti Soave, much neglected, and that's a shame. What are the themes? Well, obviously, Prosecco is a global challenge, fighting it out with champagne on the world market, or markets probably, because they're not exactly in the same market. Prosecco and Conegliano, I'm going to take off my kind of critic's hat for a moment and try to look at it from a trade point of view. Obviously, they're looking for different markets, and I think we can say that about the wines from the plain of the Veneto and Friuli, which is the Prosecco DOC, and the Conegliano and Valdobbiadene from the hills, which is the classic area. Interesting in this context, I think, to follow up the development of the Rive project, which is the local crew project, which started very, very slowly, but is picking up now a lot more producers. And I think that would be one way of making the distinction. The distinction is there in the bottle. The problem is making the distinction also on the label, I think, between a Prosecco at a certain price and one at another. The classics, Amarone. Amarone is much more consistent than it used to be, and that's to do with the control of the grape drying, which is now much further under the producer's control than it used to be. As a result, I think we're seeing fruit-driven wines. We're not seeing those kind of musty, earthy, leafy characters that we used to get, but Botrytis just disappeared from Amarone. I think one producer said to me, there's no such thing as noble rot, there's just rot. And I think that, that reflects pretty much the way they're going there. So we've got intense, deep, full-bodied fruit wines. Volcanic is one of these kind of trigger words in white wines at the moment. Soave is not all volcanic, obviously, but it's an important one. Trending, Lugana, very interesting. The Trebbiano on clay, or Turbiana on clay, has a lot more character than Trebbianos you find in central Italy. Probably because one of those kind of best kept secret things is that Turbiano or Trebbiano di Lugana is actually a biotype of Verdicchio, which is where that extra aroma is coming from. Bardolino Chiaretto doing great since they developed a stylistic makeover. They went pale, basically. They're blush now, where they used to be full on coral. Now they kind of blush, and people like those. The niches, yeah, Vespaiolo, a lovely grape, develops great sugars, keeps great acidity, makes a lovely little dessert wine. And Ritorti di Soave is, I think, a great destination for Gargaglia. Here's Friuli, the neighboring Friuli, so up here right on the border with Slovenia, where I am now. Hard for me to be objective about this because I have a great affection for this region where I kind of settled down. There's the hectares. The hectare is, as you could say, minuscule compared to the neighbouring Veneto. Those hectares divided between 9,000 producers, which comes out as 2.5 hectares per producer. And one of the themes which you come to in a minute is the fragmentation, the diversity of the fragmentation. DOPs are 17. When the system was set up in the 60s, Friuli opted for the style of the subzone plus the variety. So we've got 17 subzones and 27 authorized varieties. So first number multiplied by the second one gives you the number of DOC wines, which can be a little bit confusing. White predominates, and here I think that's probably not a big surprise. Whereas it's quite easy, I think, to be linear about the Veneto, so kind of bullet point approach. Friuli is a bit more complicated to unpack, so I put that down as a cloud. Themes, I think, a certain premium, this premium area, high quality stuff. This is not to denigrate the Veneto, but I think it's a useful comparison with less than a 1/12 of the vineyard area in the guides. And I mean, the slow wine, the Gambro, Veronelli. Friuli Giulia has the same number of awards as the Veneto, 36 to be precise. Yeah, which I think gives us an idea of the orientation. Soil is very important. When we're talking about volcanic, this is not volcanic. This is clay limestone, which gives body and aroma and richness, with the native varieties works a treat. Sauvignon came out big in my word cloud because Friuli Veneto Giulia Sauvignon, in the universe of Sauvignons, has a particular character. It has something of the fruit and the aroma of New Zealand, but it has the body and the flesh and the kind of roundness, which is typically Friulano. So that's an interesting thing to look at if you're looking at the international varieties and how they work. If you're looking for the super autochthonous, then Vitoshka from the limestone plateau over the port of Trieste, delicate, but amazingly capable of long aging. Orange wines are big. I think one of the problems with the profile of Friuli Giulia is that they don't have an iconic wine or wines, and it's hard to say who would be the iconic producer in the region, apart from the one who's really made his reputation in the area of orange wines, which I think the maturated whites are a style which Friuli, you can't actually say they invented them because they started off in other regions too. But we've developed, I think, I shouldn't be saying that, the producers have developed to a very, very fine degree. Basically, they've taken out the smelly aromas and they left the fruit and all the flesh, which is great. Okay, I need to change my slides. And here's my next one. Okay, so we're going to the center, Tuscany. There's the numbers. In this case, I've just put in the DOC, DOG, the DOP. Very interesting how over the last, well, actually, it's a very rapid increase over the last 5 or 6 years, how much of the viticulture in Tuscany has gone bio. We're now 28% of the vineyard area is in organic cultivation and growing. There's the hectares, which is certainly a lot of wine too. 62% of the vineyard area is planted to Sangiovese, and 53% of the total DOP is Sangiovese. So I mean, that's a very clear message, I think. Yeah, there's a proliferation all'italiana of the DOPs. There are 58 on paper, but I think they're more in reference books than reality. 17 of those I counted have a production of less than 1,000 hectolitres. So, not too much to worry about. But it does make a very, very busy map if you put it all on there. An interesting little statistic is how concentrated the production is. That 5.5% of the producers make 42% of the total wine production. So, I mean, you think of the big names, but as I say, that I think illustrates the lobbying power of some of the big guns in Tuscany. Right. Next one up. Chianti, I said 62% of the vineyard area is Sangiovese. 48% of that is Chianti, which is obviously a Chianti blend. Big hitters in terms of quantities, obviously. Since independence in 2010, there's the basic Chianti label obviously predominates, and the subzones have perhaps lost a little bit of provenance, with the exception, I think I would say, of the Colli Fiorentini, which is having a bit of a comeback. The Colli Senesi is standing firm, and very, very interesting, we'll come to in a minute, Rufina, which has a little identity, I think, all of itself. Many of the others, I think, are kind of dropping off the agendas of lots of people. The complication about Chianti is the range of styles, because they range from the light and fruity of a Fiorentina, the typical wicker flask of the Trattoria of Florence, to full body and age-worthy kind of wines that you find in Colli Senesi, which is obviously right down in the south with different soils and different climates. The new consortio of Chianti is using its independence, I think, to modify the DOCG. One of the proposals, which is causing a certain amount of controversy, is to introduce a Chianti Gran Selezione, which mirrors the one that Chianti Classico initiated about 4 years ago. Emulation, as I say, is the most sincere form of flattery. They're pretty controversial. As you can imagine, that doesn't go down very well with everybody. But it's an interesting concept, because it will, if this goes through the way it's planned, take Chianti DOCG up a level into more concentrated wines, in a style which I guess you call, in shorthand, more international. Okay, that was my blank. Right, Rufina, I said Rufina, very, very interesting, because it has a very precise personality all of its own. It's not big, but it's the highest and the coolest of the Chianti subzones, and it has a very precise character. It's firm, or these are the adjectives I jotted down here: firm, gritty, intense, long-lived, floral coming out, developing tertiary aromas. A very interesting wine. I think it's one of the few Chiantis which are generally made for aging, because of this, the acidity it's got and the tannins when it works well. The wines that go on forever and really develop. An interesting future project, which a group of producers in Rufina is trying to push through, is a modification which will allow them to make 100% Sangiovese Reserva with vineyard selection, as opposed to Gran Selezione, which would be a cellar selection, to use vineyard selection as a criterion, which is an interesting project, and I hope that goes through. Terre di Pisa. Terre di Pisa is a relatively recent denomination. Colline Pisane Chianti is a bottle that you haven't found, I think, anywhere, not even in the local restaurants, for a long time, which is a shame, because it does have a character. It's one of those nice, soft, bright red cherry style of Sangioveses, but that I think is hard to find these days. That I didn't need, sorry. The terroir is interesting. It's very similar to central Tuscany. The climate is much milder because of the closeness to the coast, much milder. Sangiovese has a real Sangiovese character. It has very firm tannins, and I think that is developing very well. Probably, though, where Terre di Pisa is going is in the Terre di Pisa Rosso, Syrah works excellently well. Merlot works very, very well. Cabernet, firstly, a little bit less. I've jotted modern, soft, round, and ripe, and I think probably that's where the Pisa Rosso is going. And I think from recent tastings, it's going there pretty successfully. Pinot Nobile, again, I think a wine with a very, very distinctive personality. Again, it's not huge. The hectares are barely 4% of the regional total, and the hectoliters are not huge. I think one of the things which makes Nobile interesting is that the soil is quite different from anything else where Sangiovese is planted, because it has a high percentage of sand. San Gimignano is perhaps the only other region in Tuscany which has this kind of soil type. It varies a little bit. Soils are never completely homogeneous, but I think that little percentage of sand might be one of the reasons for the particular aroma of a thing which stands out in Montepulciano. It has the kind of the iris and the violets aromas of Sangiovese, which is one of its kind of distinguishing points. It could also be the fact that Vino Nobile is still a blend, and it could be that Canaiolo, which could be the blended wine, is the secret of the aroma. But whatever it comes from, plums and violets, iris, as I said, full round tannins, wines which mature very well. Very, very interesting area. Again, here there are a producers group which is pressing for a voluntary association to make 100% Sangiovese Vino Nobile, which would be an interesting development. Okay, whites again. Oviedo makes a lot of wine. It's interregional. Most of the wine comes from Umbria, but there's a little bit of a spillover into Lazio just across the border. It comes in basic and classico and superiore. Superiore just having that extra degree of alcohol. Classico being from around the town itself. Here again, the volcanic comes up as a note on Oviedo. Again, it's not all volcanic, and I think tasting through the wines is quite interesting to notice the difference between the volcanic ones with a slightly tangy, smoky character, and the slightly richer ones from the calcareous clay soils, which are tendentially more towards the northwest. Procanico, which is a Trebbiano, and Grechetto. Grechetto, much more perfumed kind of grape than Trebbiano. So Trebbiano brings the acidity. Grechetto has the aroma, a kind of lemon, could be fennel, could be licorice, that kind of thing, which is typical actually of the Trebbiano, and lightly phenolic. And that light kind of tannin crunch is one of the reasons why Oviedo actually does mature very, very well. And at 2 or 3 or 4 years starts to develop some very, very interesting tertiary aromas. So an interesting white wine with character. Perhaps a little bit off the map for lots of people these days. It's this moment of great popularity, perhaps in the 80s and 90s, but I think well worth looking at again. And the standard of winemaking, from what I can see, has improved enormously over the last couple of vintages. Okay, Lazio. Lazio, I think, in all fairness, I have to say, perhaps not the best known of the Italian regions for its wine, apart from Frascati, which is a name that most people know, but probably a wine that fewer people are actually familiar with. That's a typical kind of situation, I think. Again, a plethora of docks, but most of them unused. Very interesting. And this, in fact, this is something that I discovered and I wasn't aware of until I started looking at this in detail, that Lazio grows over 200 grape varieties, and a lot of those minor native ones. 70% white, and a lot of that is obviously Frascati. I can't remember if I've got another. Yeah, okay, so if we look at the focus wines, they obviously, as I said, the name which most people would recognize is Frascati. You find that certainly in the Trattoria in Rome, often in eccentric kind of bottles, but be that as it may. Est, very similar grape composition. So we're looking at Malvasia and Trebbiano. Malvasia, obviously a very, very big variety family. Malvasia di Putinata, which is the local one, local to the Castelli Romani, so Frascati, gives a little bit of extra refinement, I think. Maybe the candy a little bit more neutral. Here's that note about volcanic again, and I think here we could say around Frascati that this is homogeneously volcanic. These grapes grow on Vaticanus, and that gives it that, you know, the thing which you recognise in volcanic wines, that kind of tangy, slightly smoky character, which is a distinguishing thing. Light, dry, delicately full, yeah, for sure. But as I say, with this kind of volcanic zip, which is really nice. Trending, I really want to put this in. Cesanese del Piglio, recent DOCG, 2011. It comes from a grape which is called Cesanese da Figlio, which confusingly is also a DOC. But Cesanese del Piglio probably is the more interesting one because of the soils. They're red ferrous calcareous soils. Very interesting grape, as I said, because the wines it produces give that lovely soft medium body of kind of southern central going towards the south red wines. But what's really interesting is the fruit, the lovely red fruit, and the sweet floral nose. Think rose petals, violets. Very, very interesting variety. Little known, not huge productions, but I think certainly well worth following up. That's a real gem. Puglia. Puglia is the other big hitter, isn't it? For many, many years, it vied with the Veneto for first place in terms of production. Now it's firmly in second place, and obviously I think that's to do with the Prosecco boom in terms of hectares and in terms of overall production. Veneto now is streets ahead. But the interesting thing, and I mentioned this before in contrast with the Veneto, whereas in the Veneto 70% of the production is in DOP, a very, very small percentage of the wine made in Puglia these days actually comes out with a DOC or DOCG label, whereas the EGT, well, that's the big number there. So in theory and paper, again, we have those 28 DOCs, 4 DOCs, but again, more in the reference books than in reality. It's second to the Veneto in vineyard area and in total production. And it's second only to Sicily in production of EGTs. I think that's an interesting comparison because Sicily has the same characteristic of not developing the DOCs or developing them very late, not managing that part of their wine policies perhaps to the most effective way. Doesn't take anything away from the wines, however. Okay, as the next slide comes up. So what's the focus? These are, I think, DOCs which work, and an EGT which works very, very well indeed. Primitivo di Manduria is Acca Zinfandel, as we know, is the grape, is the Primitivo stroke Zinfandel. So the kind of wines that you would expect, so powerful, full-bodied, deep, sweet red fruit, but also I think kind of a freshness which makes all that alcohol balanced and actually makes the wine quite dangerously drinkable. So Primitivo di Manduria, very, very interesting. There's also one of the DOCGs is actually a Prosecco, which follows, I guess, in the wake of Ricciotto di Amarone as a dried red grape dessert wine, which is very, very interesting and very hard to find. And those two things often go together. Salento Reds work wonderfully well, definitely with declining DOCs. So the DOC of Riferimento for the area would have been Salento. Now more likely to come up an IGT label with the variety. So it could be a Negro Amaro, it could be a Malvasia, which is coming out now also in monovarietals. Mediterranean, broad, herby, mature. The bitter twist, which comes from Negro Amaro, so black and bitter, literally translated from the Italian. Definitely, though, southern and Mediterranean, probably best in the first 5 years. I haven't tasted really old Puglia wines, probably because they don't have that kind of acidity that keeps them alive for the long haul. But we come to something which is a little bit different at the bottom. Rosato, rosé is pink wines on a roll, generally in Italy. And it's something which is exploited very, very well in Puglia. Possibly all of the grape varieties are exploited in one part of the country or another. So I said ubiquitous, and reflect very well, I think, the different terroirs, the subzones, the growing conditions from the cooler north to the warmer south, and also obviously the variety has a lot to do with it. Castel del Monte, I think, is the red wine, which is the exception to what I was saying before about Puglia reds, perhaps not necessarily staying on for the long haul, because there's a very, very different style. I think we're talking right up in the north, so cooler, damper springs, rainy springs, sunny summers, but not with the baking heat of the plain, and stony soils, quite difficult stony soils. Nero di Troia is a grape which practically unknown 10 or 12 years ago. It had its moment of cult following. That's settled down a little bit now, but I think it's still a very, very interesting grape. Bombino Nero, strangely enough, is a black grape which makes wonderful rosato, wonderful pink wines. In fact, some of the nicest rosés I've tasted from Puglia in recent times have been based on Bombino Nero and or Nero di Troia. Dark, vibrant, phenolic, vigorous, perhaps not what you would immediately think of when you're thinking of Puglia, if your reference point is Salento, but very, very interesting stuff. And that, I think, is my romp. That's my time up just about. Anthony, if there are things in the chat which I could answer straight away, we could do that for the 3 or 4 minutes which are left.
Right. Okay. Astonishingly, don't have any questions, but I've got one.
Okay.
Oh, there. Here we go. Teresa. Thank you, Teresa. Which grape would you say is the upcoming and trending grape in Puglia? Bombino Nero? Where do you see best quality?
Yeah, Bombino Nero. I definitely see Gargano, so in the North Castel del Monte. Castel del Monte is one of the DOCs, I think, which actually works as DOCs were kind of conceived. So, because the DOC should represent a soil and a terroir and a tradition. And I think Castel del Monte does that in the way that perhaps other parts of Puglia don't. And yeah, I would say Bombino Nero is very, very interesting. Very, very versatile. I've also had Spumante, white Spumante, obviously, from Bombino Nero, which is, apart from anything else, Anthony, I don't know if you've ever had your sparkling wine competitions, but that's a very interesting thing. And as I said, rosé.
Not had that variety entered, no, never.
Well, look out for it. Perhaps
yeah.
Somebody will take the hint, possibly, from this presentation.
Claudia here says that you're saying Castel del Monte can lay longer. How many?
Oh, yeah. Well, I've gone back 10 or 12 years. It's a relatively recent discovery. I mean, I think we started tasting this perhaps, where would it be? Late 90s, I suppose. We started tasting this. Producers started producing it as a monovarietal. Then it came into the Castel del Monte denomination as a monovarietal afterwards. Yeah, And the wines I was tasting then certainly looked like they'd be going on for a bit. And the more recent things, 8-10 years easily. Yeah, easily. Nice wines.
A question from Paul. Lots of regions in Italy, and can't cover them all. But anything come to mind as an interesting trending wine in the regions you did not mention?
Am I allowed to, actually?
Well, not really, no, but we can allow it, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I would say if you're looking for something which is going to be niche and iconic, so I'm not going to upset anybody with this one. Have a look at the Tuscan Archipelago. So Elba, for example, and some of the minor islands where some very interesting things are going on. And if you're looking for a really interesting story, have a look at the project which Frescobaldi have set up to produce white wines and a prison colony on an island in the Tuscan Archipelago, which, apart from being a very interesting social project, actually make a very, very nice wine.
Right. See if I can get back in now. Okay, there we are. So I had to get my glasses. I had trouble reading the questions. So I'm just going to get some glasses. A couple more questions though, but
Go ahead.
on the sparkling, is most of Franciacorta still heading towards bio? On my last visit, they were aiming for 100%. Claudia.
So, yeah, I missed a bit of the question. So
yeah, is most of Franciacorta still heading towards bio?
Okay. Yeah.
It says that they were aiming for 100% on our last visit.
Yeah, that's right. That is the consortium. And in parenthesis, I think Franciacorta has one of the most efficient and clear-thinking producing consortium anywhere in Italy. Very, very savvy. That is the official policy. That's what they're working for. It's difficult because it's not a climate which you'd immediately think of. Subalpine, a lot of water around there. But yeah, certainly that's the policy, and that's where they're going. The president of the consortium is one of the leaders in this, one of the first to plant bio, and they're now looking with biodynamic too. So leading by example, and I think I can confirm that's where they want to be. Absolutely.
Sticking with fizz, Paul asks Lambrusco is on fire in my market. Any comments?
Yeah, right. It's a wine I'd always have at home. Honestly, yeah, I love this stuff. Again, it's slightly off the agenda this afternoon, but yeah, if you're if you're looking for confirmation, yeah, you've got it. It's lovely stuff.
Okay, I have a question. We'll get some more in, hopefully. In your presentation, there's a word called rive or rive. I don't know what the pronunciation is.
Ah, sorry. Okay. Yeah, the rive is a sub-denomination. This was.
Sorry. So what is that exactly? In compared to Prosecco, what's the difference?
Right. Well, Valdobbiadene, Conegliano is the classic area hillside Prosecco. What it used to be, when the grape was called Prosecco. When they became DOCG in 2009 and the DOC for the plain was devised, they were obviously looking for ways to differentiate themselves. And one of the ways they did that was to use the word rive, which corresponds roughly to cru in French, it would be a village cru, to distinguish between the different villages. In theory, all of the communes of Valdobbiadene and Conegliano can label their wines, assuming that they're made actually in the commune, with the rive, with the name of their village. So in terms of Burgundy, it would be like a village cru. On paper, there are 42. In reality, there are 10 or 12 where they have a certain amount of production, enough to have comparisons between them and enough to say, yeah, this cru definitely has its own character. And that's a very, very interesting research thing, actually. If you're going to the area, if you're setting up tastings with the consortium, that's something which, you know, I'd be asking them to do, because Santo Stefano, for example, has a different character to Vidos, and Vidos has a different character to, say, it escapes me for the minute, but, you know, it's a concept which took a long time to take off. Now the producers believe in it, and I think it makes a difference. It's great policy.
Well, how about the consumer though, the importer? They
Well, what I would say is that you can't you can't sell it until it exists. So I think, yeah, it's gonna take a while. But I think it's one of the things. I think somehow or other you have to justify this price differential, and DOCG by itself is not enough, I think, to make the difference. Valdobbiadene and Conegliano is a hell of a mouthful, and people are not going to ask for Prosecco, Valdobbiadene, and Conegliano when they go for the aperitivo. So, you know, something on the label which does mark it out from the stuff from the plains, which, you know, as I say, I don't take off my critic's hat for a moment, is looking for a different market. I think it's something which is justified. And I would say too that it has a productive reality. So it's not just a marketing ploy. It is something which really reflects the crude character, the differences in soil and aspect and elevation, which is one of the interesting things when you get into it. In parenthesis, Valdobbiadene is really beautiful countryside. If you're into cycling or hiking, anything like that, it's great area to tour.
Right. So one more on fizz. Fernando is asking, in your opinion, why Prosecco is a big success all over the world?
Mystery. I wish I could answer that. No, I think, you know, in marketing terms, you know, critical mass has got something to do with it. It's an easy drink. It doesn't have pronounced character, put it that way. I think what I would say is that the standard of the winemaker is pretty good. I think no, actually, I've run out of arguments on that one. I can't get beyond that one. I drink it at home. I keep Prosecco at home, and I think it's an easy drinking, undemanding, immediate, accessible, understandable, not too gassy, not too still, not too aromatic, not too plain, not too sweet, not too dry. When they get it right, it's fine. It's Prosecco.
Okay, good answer actually. Teresa says you mentioned orange wine from Friuli.
Yeah.
As far as you know, are there any other regions that reach the same quality when it comes to this kind of wine?
No, you asked me to put my critic's hat on again, which I'm trying to avoid. I think what I would say is that in Friuli, we've been working on these now for 10, 12, perhaps a couple more years, and producers have really got a handle on it. So they've taken away those kind of smelly off aromas that they used to get through the uncontrolled fermentations, for example, which used to be a very big problem. And it's a problem that you still see, I think, in the orange wines in other regions, in Lombardia, for example. So I think, you know, they're getting much closer to, if you like, standard enological profiles, but with this extra added dimension of the tannins and the glycerine, the stuff that you get when you maturate your white grapes. And yeah, I mean, if you want a non-evasive answer to that question, no, I think Friuli does it best. There you are.
Right. Okay, and then there's Aperol Spritz becoming quite the aperitivo.
Yeah.
Doug Juan, I think he's from over in Korea at the moment.
Yeah.
He's asking, in Piemonte, dry orange wine can be made from Moscato Grappiato. Is that, I'm not sure if that's a comment or a question. Sorry.
If it's a comment, yeah, absolutely. If it's a question, yes, confirm. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, Jerry's asking, what do you think about Aglianico, del vulture vine, volcanic grape?
Yeah, volcanic Aglianico, certainly. Yeah.
What do you think about it?
Yeah, what I think about it, I think it's not all volcanic. I mean, I think we have to be a little bit more precise when we talk about volcanic. Volcanic has become a bit of a buzzword, as we know, in the context mainly of wines. But Basilicata is one of those areas which does have volcanic soils, and Aglianico on a volcanic soil is a very interesting wine, and it has something which the other wines of the region and the majority of the other wines which are not on volcanic soil don't have. The smokiness, the intensity, a little bit more acidity possibly. Certainly interesting wines. So if you ask me, do I like them? Yes, very much. But I think Aglianico, which is a very interesting grape. I mean, Aglianico in Chileno is one thing, in Irpinia is another. But probably in Basilicata, it's got its most refined interpretation. So yeah, it's in parenthesis, a wine. I'm just thinking now about a couple of wines I've got downstairs, which I'm not in a rush to drink, and they're already 12 and 15 years old. So it's definitely a wine that ages.
Okay, a question from Japan, I believe, concerning Umbria. We would like to ask what the trend is of the Sagrantino grape variety.
Yeah, lightening up, I would say. The style is lightened up a lot. This was, it's a massive grape. It has the highest extract, natural extract of any grape variety, including Cabernet or nothing else that grows in Italy has that kind of level of extract. It has massive alcohol. It's a real punch ball of a wine. And I think the trend in the past has been to kind of exploit that with lots of new oak and to give it to bring out the muscle, I suppose. Now I think we're going in the opposite direction. We're lightening up. So I think slightly less green harvesting, so to concentrate the fruit. I think probably shorter maturation times and a more delicate maturation. And probably the trend is away from the lots of new oak, lots of new small oak. I mean, at one time, their producers were actually doing 200% barrique, so they do 6 months in one and they move it into another new one. So that kind of 200% barrique approach. I think that is no longer true. So we're looking at tonneau, and even the big traditional oak casks are coming back again. So yeah, in a word, lightening up, I think, would how I sum it up.
Okay, I think one final question from Artie. What is the production and qualitative status of the Piemonte?
Well, again, it's slightly off the agenda. Piemonte, I think it's hard to generalize about Piemonte. Langhe is Nebbiolo, obviously. I think Monferrato, which is Barbera, basically is up and coming. And that kind of style of Barbera is coming on a lot. The Alto Piemonte sparkling wines from Chardonnay are starting to do very, very well indeed. So that's something which is worth looking at. I mean, everything is being pulled along by Prosecco. So it's got bubbles and it's Italian. It's doing well at the moment. And so the Piemonte sparkling wines are benefiting from that. Asti a little bit less, to be honest, because they're sweet. And like I said before, sweet wines are shamefully disregarded these days, but that's the way it is. Trending, I would say not very much. I think classic is probably sums it up. If you're looking for something different, then you could look for Dolcetto from Dogliani, which is just called Dogliani now, which is very interesting in the south of it. If you're looking for something completely off the wall, then Grignolino or Rouquet would fit that bill. But probably you go to Piemonte for the classics, which would be Barolo, Barbaresco, obviously, and Barbera.
Okay. I think there's no more questions at the moment. Let me just come back in. There we go. Okay, Richard, well, thank you very much. It's been very informative and certainly taken us around the regions that with producers that are appearing in this 2-day trade show. So where we've been put on the map, and thank you for that. And thank you very much for that brilliant presentation and handling of the questions that came in. Thank you.
Well, thank you again, everybody, for your interest. And if there are further questions, send them to Anthony, and you can forward them to me, and I'd be pleased to get back to you in writing. Okay, so enjoy the next couple of days, and keep on drinking Italian. Bye. Okay, bye-bye. Just before we go, though, just to let people know that if you missed the beginning of this program, it's actually being recorded and will go up on the winepleasures.com website under Italian Week replay, so you can watch it again in about 15 minutes time. We should have it up for people to view. So next session is at 2:15. You have to register, take the link which we just posted on the chat there at the top. If you click on that link, that will take you to the next session, where we have live interviews with De Stefani, Veneto, and from Lazio we have Eredi dei Papi, and from Tuscany, Castellina and Chianti, La Castellina, my pronunciation. Richard, was that good? Yeah, sounds fine. Yeah, gets the message over. So those three producers are up next. They've got incredible wines, working in incredible regions for tourism. So please join us at 2:15 for the live interviews with the producers. Say the link is on the chat at the top right. And thank you all for joining us in this webinar. I see that over 67 people on the live stream. So we'll see you in a bit. Time for a cup of tea or a glass of wine? Now, thanks, Richard. Yeah, bye. You're welcome. See you again. Bye.